The scent of yeast and sugar was Clara Evans's oldest memory, a perfume more familiar than her own skin. For 45 years, the daily loaf had been not just her bakery, but her heart. Its rhythm synced to the pre-dawn hum of the ovens and the cheerful jingle of the doorbell. At 68, her hands were a roadmap of her life, nicked by serrated blades, calloused from wooden rolling pins, and permanently dusted with a fine trace of flour that no amount of washing could ever fully erase. They were honest hands and she was proud of them. This morning the familiar ritual felt heavier. The dough for the sourdough bowls was proving more slowly than usual, as if sensing her anxiety. The quarterly rent was due, and the notice from her landlord, a faceless corporate entity that had bought the building 2 years prior, had been less than forgiving. A new sleek cafe called Gourmet Haven had opened 3 doors down, luring her older customers with minimalist decor, avocado toast, and a loyalty app she couldn't compete with. "Deep breaths, Clara," she murmured to herself, sliding a tray of perfectly shaped cinnamon buns into the warming oven. Worry never baked a good bun. The bell above the door jingled and Clara's heart lifted, expecting Mrs. Gable from the flower shop for her usual poppy seed muffin. But the air shifted, growing colder, denser. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the soft morning light, were her 2 children. Daniel, at 42, looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive watches. His suit was a sharp, dark gray, tailored to perfection, and his eyes were already scanning the bakery with a clinical detachment that made Clara's stomach clench. Beside him stood Chloe, a vision of curated casualness in a cream-colored linen ensemble. At 40, she held herself with the poised awareness of someone who was always, on some level, being photographed. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice a baritone that carried more command than warmth. He leaned in for a stiff, one-armed hug, careful not to brush against the flour on her apron. Chloe offered an air kiss near Clara's cheek. "The place smells wholesome," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. A cold dread, entirely separate from her rent anxieties, began to pool in Clara's gut. They never visited together on a Tuesday morning. This was a coordinated strike. "To what do I owe this wonderful surprise?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron, a gesture that suddenly felt shameful under their combined gaze. "We need to talk, Mom," Daniel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Somewhere private." She led them to the small office in the back, a cramped space dominated by invoices, recipe cards, and a faded photo of her late husband Leo, his carpenter's hands wrapped around her flour-dusted ones. They were both so large in this small room, their expensive scents overwhelming the comforting aroma of bread. Daniel got straight to the point. "We're worried about you, Mom. The bakery. It's not sustainable." Clara's spine straightened. "It's had a rough few months, Daniel. Every small business has. But we'll pull through. We always have." "Pull through with what?" Chloe interjected, her voice softening into a tone Clara recognized as her managing a crisis voice. "Your savings are gone. You've taken a second mortgage on the house. This isn't a rough patch. It's a downward spiral." "I have a plan," Clara insisted, her voice trembling slightly. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "I've modernized the business plan. We can introduce online ordering, specialty dietary items, and—" Daniel took the folder, glanced at it for barely 3 seconds, and set it down with a dismissive sigh. "Throwing good money after bad, Mom. This," he gestured around the tiny office, "is a sentimental hobby. It's not a life. It's certainly not a retirement plan." The words hit her like a physical blow. A hobby? This bakery had put them through college. It had paid for Daniel's business degree and Chloe's art history courses. It had been the stability that held their world together after Leo died so suddenly, so unfairly young. "What are you saying?" Clara whispered. "We're saying it's time to be realistic," Daniel said, pulling a different, thicker set of documents from his leather briefcase. "We've had our lawyer draw up some papers. A trust. We'll manage your assets, the house, whatever is left here, for you. It will protect you. Protect me from what? Clara asked, her voice gaining a shred of its old steel. From yourself, Chloe said gently, patting her hand. From making emotional decisions. We'll sell the bakery, pay off the debts, and you can move into a lovely retirement community. The Willows. It has a pool and organized activities. You won't have to worry about a thing. Clara looked from her son's impassive face to her daughter's condescending smile. They had it all figured out. They had discussed her life's work, and deemed it a failure that needed to be managed and disposed of. The betrayal was so profound it was numbing. I need to think about this, she stammered, feeling the walls close in. Of course, Daniel said, but he pushed the documents and a pen toward her. But the offer for the bakery is time-sensitive. It's best we get this sorted now. For your peace of mind. Blinded by tears she refused to shed in front of them, her hand shaking. Clara Evans signed away control of her life on the dotted lines they pointed to. It felt less like a signature and more like a surrender. A week later the official notice came. The bakery had been sold. Not to another baker. Not to someone who would carry on its legacy. It had been sold to the corporate parent company of Gourmet Haven. They were going to tear it down, expand, and create a brand-coherent consumer experience. She was given 30 days to vacate the premises and a cash settlement. The number was a pittance, an insult wrapped in legal paper. A generous severance. The letter called it. It felt like a payment for her own execution. The following weeks were a blur of grief. Clara moved through her small, quiet house like a ghost. The silence a stark contrast to the bakery's constant, warm cacophony. The neighbors were kind, leaving casseroles on her porch with sympathetic notes. Their pity was a salt in the wound. One afternoon, fueled by a desperate need to do something, anything, she decided to finally tackle the spare room. It was a repository of a lifetime, filled with Leo's old tools, boxes of the children's school projects, and her grandmother Isabelle's furniture. Isabelle Devereaux had been a formidable presence in Clara's childhood, elegant, sharp, and somehow separate from the rest of the family. While Clara's parents had been social climbers, obsessed with appearances, Isabelle had always seemed amused by it all. She had doted on Clara, the quiet, flowery child who preferred the kitchen to the cocktail parties. In the corner sat Isabelle's old writing desk, a beautiful mahogany piece with intricate inlay. Clara had always loved it, but one of the small upper drawers had been permanently stuck. Today, feeling a surge of futile anger, she grabbed a hammer and a screwdriver. If she couldn't fix her life, she could at least fix this damn drawer. She didn't need to force it. As she wrestled with it, applying pressure to the side, there was a soft, splintering crack. Not from her force, but from the failure of old, brittle wood. The entire drawer front came away in her hand, revealing it wasn't a drawer front at all, but a false panel. Behind it was a deep, hidden compartment. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Inside the secret space lay a single object. A thick ledger-style book bound in soft, worn brown leather. It smelled of old paper and faintly, of Isabelle's signature rose perfume. Tucked into its pages was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. With trembling fingers, Clara pulled it out. Her name was written on the front in the elegant, unwavering script she would recognize anywhere. To my dear Clara, the only one who inherited my heart. Tears she had been holding back for weeks finally fell, hot and silent. She broke the seal. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means the world has been unkind, and you have finally been pushed to look beyond the surface. You were always too good for this family, too trusting. I saw the same avarice in your parents that I see budding in your brother, and I fear I see its reflection in your own children. It is a regret of my life that my own success may have planted these seeds. I could not protect you from life, but I can arm you for it. You have a strength you do not yet realize. This ledger contains the truth of my life, not the society page version. The key to understanding it is forgotten flower. Take this to Arthur Pendleton. He has been waiting. Be strong, my girl. Be the woman I always knew you could be. With all my love. Grandmother Isabelle. Clara sat back on her heels, the letter pressed to her chest. Forgotten flower. The words unlocked a floodgate of memory. She was 10 years old in Isabelle's vast, intimidating kitchen. They had been trying to make lavender scones, but Clara, distracted by a butterfly outside the window, had forgotten the flour. The resulting paste had been a hilarious, inedible disaster. Instead of scolding her, Isabelle had laughed, a real deep-throated laugh she rarely shared, and christened the recipe Forgotten Flour. It became their private joke, a symbol of a rare, unguarded moment of joy. A code. A key. Her hand shook as she opened the ledger. It was not filled with simple numbers. The pages were a complex web of symbols, abbreviations, and cryptic entries written in the same elegant hand. E68%, silent partner board seat veto. V-resort seat and board seat. Full voting rights on expansion. DT Block full title Pendleton Trust Holding. Symphony Endowment Chair Artistic Director Approval. None of it made sense. V-resort? It was a foreign language. But one thing was clear. This was not the diary of a simple society wife. This was the record of a general. A strategist. Arthur Pendleton. The name was familiar. He was the family lawyer, a quiet, dignified man who had handled Isabelle's estate. He had given a eulogy at her funeral, speaking of her grace and charity. He had never mentioned a ledger. Clara called his office, her voice unsteady. When she mentioned her name and the phrase Forgotten Flower, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mrs. Evans, the secretary finally said, her tone shifting to one of deep respect. Mr. Pendleton will clear his schedule. Can you come in this afternoon? Arthur Pendleton's office was a world away from the messy warmth of her bakery. It was all dark wood, leather, and silence, smelling of lemon polish and old money. Arthur himself had aged well, his sharp eyes missing nothing behind gold-rimmed glasses. He stood as she entered, taking her hands in his. "Clara," he said, his voice warm with a genuine affection that surprised her. "I've wondered if this day would ever come." Isabelle was sure it would. He guided her to a plush chair and sat opposite her, the ledger resting on the desk between them like a holy text. "What is this, Arthur?" Clara asked, her voice a whisper. "What was my grandmother?" Arthur smiled, a small knowing thing. Isabelle Devereux was the most brilliant financial mind I have ever had the privilege of knowing. The public saw a philanthropist, a socialite. The private reality was that she built a secret empire. He opened the ledger, his long finger tracing the entries. "J is Gourmet Haven. Your grandmother was the silent majority owner. She founded it 40 years ago as a single coffee cart, built it into a franchise, and then took a back seat, letting others be the public face. She retained a controlling 68% stake and a permanent veto on the board." Clara felt the air leave her lungs. Gourmet Haven. The monster that had devoured her bakery was a creature her own grandmother had created. The irony was so sharp it was painful. "V-resort is Viridia," Arthur continued. "The eco-luxury resort in Costa Rica your daughter Chloe is so enamored with. Isabelle was the primary seed investor. She has a permanent seat on the board with full voting rights, particularly on brand partnerships and expansions. Chloe, who had called the bakery quaint and unambitious. And DT Block? Clara managed to ask. Downtown Tower Block. The one with the flagship store for Apex Tech. Arthur looked at her over his glasses. Daniel's company. Isabelle owned the entire building. She purchased it decades ago when it was a derelict warehouse. Your son's multi-million-dollar store operates on a lease. A lease your grandmother granted. The world tilted on its axis. Clara gripped the arms of her chair. Her children, who had so casually dismantled her life, were living, working, and building their identities on a foundation that belonged to her. They worshipped at altars they didn't know she owned. She never said a word, Clara stammered. She had her reasons, Arthur said gently. She saw how money corrupted your parents. She wanted you to be loved for who you were, not what you had. She also believed that character was forged in struggle. She wanted you to have a real life, a meaningful life, before you inherited the power to change lives. She left you the bakery, a small but solid inheritance, to see what you would build yourself. And you built a beautiful thing, Clara. A community. Tears streamed down Clara's face freely now. They were not tears of self-pity, but of a profound, awakening understanding. She had spent 45 years seeing herself as the humble baker, the simple mother. She had defined herself by her children's dismissive assessment. But her grandmother, the formidable Isabelle, had seen a different woman. She had seen an heir. So, Clara said, her voice finding a new solid core. What happens now? Now, Arthur said, closing the ledger and pushing it toward her. You decide what to do with your inheritance. The legal work is done. Everything is held in the Pendleton Family Trust, with you as the sole beneficiary and decision-maker. You have always been one of the wealthiest women in this city, Clara. You just didn't know it on paper. Clara stood and walked to the large window, looking down at the city sprawling below. Daniel's store was a gleaming needle in the distance. Chloe's dream resort was a continent away. Her bakery was a ghost. A strange calm settled over her. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but it was now joined by something else, purpose. Daniel and Chloe had not just taken her bakery, they had tried to take her dignity, her agency. They had treated her love as a weakness and her life's work as trash. Revenge, the cold, sharp kind, flickered in her heart. But it was quickly tempered by something deeper, something she had inherited from both Leo and Isabelle. A desire to build, to fix, to teach. She turned to Arthur, her eyes clear and determined. I don't want to just take it all away from them, she said. That would make me no better than them. They think money is power. They need to learn what power really is. Arthur nodded, a glint of approval in his eyes. What do you have in mind? I want to give them a choice, Clara said, the plan forming in her mind as she spoke. The same choice they gave me. They can continue on their current path, but they'll have to do it without the unearned foundation they've been standing on. They'll have to truly earn it, or they can choose to become different people. She outlined her plan. For Daniel, it would be a lesson in humility and consequence. For Chloe, a lesson in authenticity and value. She would not reveal herself. She would be the anonymous force, the invisible hand of the market they so admired, guiding them toward a cliff of their own making. I need your help, Arthur. And she thought of the one person in the bakery who had shown her not just loyalty, but a sharp, modern intelligence. I need to bring in one more person. My former employee, Maya. Then it shall be done, Arthur said. Consider me your general, Clara. The battle is yours to command. Maya's reaction was a thing of beautiful, righteous fury. When Clara and Arthur explained the situation in the secure confines of his office, the young woman's eyes widened, then narrowed with a ferocious glee. They did what? She hissed, her fists clenching. After everything you did for them? We have to burn it all down, Clara. We have to nuke them from orbit. Clara almost smiled. We're not going to nuke them, Maya. We're going to re-educate them. Over the next week, a war room was established in Clara's sunlit living room. A stark contrast to the corporate battles they were planning. Maya, with her business degree and social media savvy, was the perfect strategist. Arthur provided the legal and financial firepower. Project Phoenix, for Daniel. Daniel's entire identity was tied to his success at Apex Tech. His flagship store was his trophy. Clara, as the owner of the entire building, had the power to make that trophy tarnish. Here's the plan, Maya said, tapping her laptop. We initiate a massive city-mandated historical facade restoration project. The building's original 1920s stonework is a protected feature. The restoration will require enormous sidewalk sheds and scaffolding, completely obscuring the storefront for a minimum of 12 months. It's perfectly legal, Arthur added. And as the building owner, we are obligated to ensure the safety of the public. The city will fully support it. It will be noisy, dirty, and will reduce foot traffic to his store by an estimated 70%. Clara pictured it. Daniel's sleek, glass-fronted temple of technology, hidden behind grimy scaffolding, the constant sound of jackhammers drowning out his sales pitches. His quarterly numbers, the god he truly worshipped, would plummet. Approve it, Clara said, her voice quiet but firm. And ensure the construction company is the slowest, but most legally meticulous we can find. Project Authenticity. For Chloe. Chloe's life was a curated performance for her 500,000 followers. Her ambition was to become the face of Viridia, a partnership that would cement her as a serious lifestyle influencer. Viridia is launching a new brand ambassador program, Maya explained, pulling up the resort's Instagram. It's the talk of Chloe's world. She's desperate for it. The application involves a lengthy essay on authentic living. We can ensure she is shortlisted, Arthur said. But the final stage, which we will institute, is a mandatory month-long back-to-basics internship. No social media, no luxury. The applicants will live in staff accommodation, work in the resort's organic gardens, kitchens, and cleaning crews. They will be paid a standard staff wage. It was diabolical. Chloe, who documented every artfully arranged acai bowl, would be forced to weed vegetable patches and scrub toilets. Her perfectly manicured online persona would be shattered. Make it so, Clara said, and ensure the selection committee is persuaded that this new internship is essential for finding a truly authentic ambassador. The wheels were set in motion. Clara signed the documents as C. Devereaux, a name that felt both foreign and fitting on her tongue. The power she wielded was terrifying, a dormant volcano that had suddenly awakened. She felt Isabelle's presence beside her, not as a gentle ghost, but as a fellow general. Watching from the shadows was the hardest part. She saw Daniel on the local business news, his smile tight as he gave a bland statement about temporary inconveniences and long-term vision. She saw Chloe's excited posts about being shortlisted for the Viridia Ambassador Program, her captions full of words like journey, soul, and purpose. The construction barriers went up around Daniel's store. The first photos of the obscured facade appeared on business blogs with headlines questioning Apex Tech's downtown viability. Chloe, after a dramatic farewell post to her followers about going off-grid to find her truth, boarded a flight to Costa Rica. The lessons had begun. Daniel's descent was slow, public, and excruciating. The first month he was all bluster and corporate optimism. He instituted a scaffolding sale and increased digital advertising. But the numbers didn't lie. Foot traffic evaporated. The constant drone of construction equipment made the shopping experience unbearable. His staff grew demoralized. By the third month, the board's patience wore thin. Daniel was called into emergency meetings, his every decision questioned. The man who had always exuded control began to show cracks. He started working from the site, a futile attempt to project strength. Clara, from a cafe across the street, watched him one afternoon, yelling at a construction foreman, his face flushed with a frustration he couldn't bully his way out of. He was being defeated not by a corporate rival, but by the gritty, unglamorous reality of bricks and mortar, a reality his mother understood intimately. He started coming to her house unannounced, not for comfort but to vent. "It's a nightmare, Mom," he'd say, pouring himself a scotch from Leo's old decanter without asking. "The city, the contractors, the board, they're all idiots. They don't understand the vision." Clara would listen, sipping her tea, saying nothing. She saw the boy in him, the one who used to build elaborate forts with Leo, now trying to build an empire on a foundation of sand he didn't own. "Perhaps you need a different vision, Daniel," she suggested softly one evening. He looked at her as if she'd spoken in tongues. "What?" "No. The vision is fine. It's the execution that's being sabotaged." He couldn't see it. The problem wasn't the scaffolding. It was him. He had never learned to value anything he couldn't put on a spreadsheet. Chloe's education was more internal, but no less brutal. The first week at Viridia was a shock to her system. Her phone was confiscated. Her designer luggage was exchanged for sturdy, plain staff uniforms. She was assigned to the kitchen, her first task being to peel 50 pounds of potatoes. Maya, through contacts at the resort, received regular discreet updates. Chloe was initially a disaster. She cried. She complained. She tried to pull rank, mentioning her follower count to people who had never heard of her. They were unimpressed. But then something shifted. Stripped of her digital armor and her ability to perform, Chloe was left with only herself. The work was hard, menial, and repetitive, but it was also tangible. There was a primal satisfaction in seeing a mountain of vegetables she had chopped transformed into a meal for hundreds. There was no like button for a clean industrial stove, only the silent approval of the stern head chef. She was paired with a woman named Rosa, a single mother who worked 2 jobs at the resort to support her son. Rosa was patient, teaching Chloe not just how to bake the resort's famous coconut bread, but why the recipe worked. They talked during their breaks. Rosa spoke of her struggles, her dreams for her son, her pride in her work. Her story was one of genuine resilience, not curated hardship. One update made Clara's breath catch. Chloe, after a long day in the gardens, had successfully grafted a mango tree sapling. The report included a photo, taken by the grounds manager. It showed Chloe, her face smudged with dirt, her hair a mess, but she was smiling. Not her camera smile, but a real wide, unself-conscious grin of pure accomplishment. It was the most beautiful Clara had seen her look in years. The curated, perfect Chloe was being slowly dismantled, and someone new, someone real, was beginning to emerge from the rubble. The breaking point came for both of them simultaneously. Daniel received his final ultimatum from the board. Fix the store's performance in 1 quarter or be replaced. The pressure broke him. He called Chloe not for a strategy session but because he had no one else. Clara listened from the hallway as he spoke on the phone, his voice ragged. "They don't care, Chloe. They don't care about the long term. They just see the numbers. It's all just numbers." There was a long pause. "Do you ever feel like we're just pretending? Like we're in a play and we forgot the lines?" He was silent, listening to his sister. "Yeah," he finally said, his voice thick. "Me too. This resort thing, it sounds hard. Real." They talked for an hour, a conversation devoid of boasting or one-upmanship. It was a conversation of shared failure, of confusion, of regret. It was the first honest talk they'd had in a decade. The next day, they both arrived on Clara's doorstep. They looked different. Daniel's suit was rumpled, his confidence gone, replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion. Chloe was tanned, her hands showing faint calluses, her expression sober and grounded. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice rough, "we lost our jobs." "Not officially," Chloe clarified, her voice quieter, more measured. "But it's over for both of us. Daniel's store is failing because of this endless construction, and I dropped out of the Viridia program." Clara ushered them in, her heart a battlefield of maternal instinct and hard-won resolve. She put the kettle on. "What happened?" she asked, pouring tea into the old, chipped mugs they'd used since they were children. Daniel told his story of corporate betrayal and impossible obstacles. Chloe spoke of the grueling work of Rosa, of the mango tree. She didn't frame it as a failure, but as a discovery. "I was terrible at it," Chloe admitted, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "But I learned." I actually learned how to do something real. It felt good. I don't know what to do, Daniel confessed, staring into his tea. My whole life has been about winning, about being the best. And now I've lost, and I don't know who I am without the title. This was the moment. The classroom was silent. The students were broken and ready to listen. Clara took a deep breath. Maybe, she said softly, it's time to stop trying to be the best and start trying to be better. She stood up. There's someone you need to meet. She led them into the living room, where Arthur Pendleton and Maya were waiting, the ledger open on the coffee table. Daniel and Chloe stared, confused. Mr. Pendleton? What are you doing here? Daniel asked. Hello, Daniel, Chloe, Arthur said calmly. I'm here on behalf of your mother. And her grandmother, Isabelle Devereaux. Clara stood before them, no longer the defeated baker but the heir. Her voice was clear and steady, filled with a power they had never heard. Your store, Daniel, was failing because I, as the owner of your building, initiated the restoration project. The impossible obstacle was me. Daniel's face went pale. What? Your internship, Chloe, Clara continued, turning to her daughter. The Back to Basics program was my idea. I instituted it as the majority investor in Viridia. The sabotage you both faced was my design. The silence in the room was absolute. The confusion on their faces morphed into dawning horror, then into a stunned, staggering comprehension. You own my building? Daniel whispered. You own Viridia? Chloe echoed, her hand flying to her mouth. I own Gourmet Haven, Clara said, the final devastating blow. The company you sold my bakery to. The company that tore it down. She let the truth hang in the air. Let them feel its full crushing weight. She saw the moment it truly hit them. The realization that every move they had made against her, they had made on a board she controlled. Their power was an illusion. Her quiet, simple life had been a choice, not a limitation. I didn't do this for revenge, Clara said, her voice softening as she saw the genuine shock and shame in their eyes. I did it because I failed you as a mother. Mom, no, Chloe began, but Clara held up a hand. I did. I gave you everything you wanted and nothing of what you needed. I never taught you about struggle, about empathy, about the value of something you build with your own hands. Your grandmother, Isabelle, left me a fortune, but she also left me a lesson. True wealth is not in a bank account. It's in the strength of your character and the love you nurture. I had to let you lose everything you thought was important so you could find what truly is. She gestured to the ledger. This isn't just a record of wealth. It's a ledger of my grandmother's regrets. Regrets about the kind of family her money created. I didn't want to add to it. I wanted to balance it. Daniel sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. Chloe was crying silent tears. I'm so sorry, Mom, Daniel choked out, the words seeming to be ripped from him. What we did, it was monstrous. It was, Clara agreed without malice. But the question isn't about the past. It's about the future. Who do you want to be now? She looked at them, her children, finally humbled, finally still. I am reopening the Daily Loaf, she announced. Not as a struggling bakery, but as a flagship. A place with a community kitchen to teach baking to at-risk youth. A place that offers microloans to other food artisans. I'm calling it Isabelle's. I'm building something new. Something that matters. You can walk away with your settlement money and try to rebuild your old lives elsewhere. Or, she paused, letting the offer hang in the air. Or you can stay. You can help me. Not as my financial managers but as my partners. Daniel, you have a brilliant mind for logistics and systems. Use it for something that feeds souls, not just spreadsheets. Chloe, you understand branding and storytelling. Use it to tell the stories of real people making real things. But you will start at the bottom. You will learn the business from the flower up. The choice is yours. It was the same choice they had given her, but inverted. They could choose comfort and irrelevance, or they could choose struggle and purpose. Daniel looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. The bottom. Peeling potatoes, Clara said with a small smile. Yes. Chloe wiped her tears and looked at her brother. A silent understanding passed between them. They had been to the mountaintop of superficial success and found it empty. The valley below for the first time looked like solid ground. Daniel took a deep breath. I don't know how to peel potatoes. I'll teach you, Chloe said, a real weary, hopeful smile finally breaking through. I'm actually pretty good at it now. 6 months later, the doors to Isabelle's opened. It was not just a bakery. It was a testament. The space was warm and modern, honoring the past while embracing the future. The scent of baking bread was the same, but the feeling in the air was new, charged with purpose. Clara at the helm was a serene force. The flour on her hands was no longer a mark of struggle, but a badge of honor. Daniel, having shed his suits for sturdy aprons, managed the supply chain and the microloan program with a focus and integrity he'd never had before. He was harder on himself than any corporate board had ever been. Chloe ran the communications and the community outreach. Her blog, The Unvarnished Life, was now a raw, honest chronicle of their rebuilding, featuring stories of the single mothers and aspiring bakers they were helping through their programs. She had fewer followers, but her engagement was with real people. They weren't a perfect family. Old habits died hard. There were arguments and frustrations, but they were arguments about how to better source their chocolate, or how to structure a loan, not about profit margins and perceived slights. They were a team. One evening after a long, successful day, Clara stood alone in the quiet bakery. She looked at the black and white portrait of Isabelle they had hung on the wall, next to one of Leo holding his tools. We did it, she thought to the two most influential people in her life. We balanced the ledger. From the portrait, Isabelle's sharp eyes seemed to hold a glint of approval. Leo's smile was as warm as ever. The bell on the door jingled. Maya came in holding a box of fresh strawberries. For tomorrow's scones, she said. Behind her were Daniel and Chloe, laughing about something, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the display case lights. Clara Evans smiled. The bakery was full again, not just with the smell of bread, but with the sound of a family finally coming home. Justice had not been revenge. It had been a recipe, and the key ingredient she now knew had always been love.